I hid under the bed on my wedding night to surprise my husband, expecting a romantic start to our life together. Instead, I watched two pairs of shoes walk in, trapped beneath the dust ruffle. I listened to a conversation that turned my $20,000 gown into a shroud for our marriage. They thought they were destroying a naive heiress, but they ignited the most ruthless revenge New York high society has ever seen. My name is Scarlet Hayes, and until tonight, I truly believed fairy tales existed. The Plaza Hotel ballroom was still vibrating with the energy of 500 guests, the air thick with the scent of white roses and expensive perfume. It was the kind of New York wedding that would grace the cover of Vogue, a perfect union between the heiress of sterling tech and the dashing Julian Thorne. My feet throbbed inside my satin heels, a dull ache that felt like a badge of honor after 12 hours of smiling for cameras and accepting endless congratulations. I leaned against the cool marble wall of the elevator bank, adjusting the strap of my gown. "You go on up, darling," Julian had whispered, pressing a kiss to my temple just minutes ago. His breath had smelled of vintage champagne and peppermint. I need to handle a few last-minute details with the hotel manager regarding the final invoice. I won't be long. Don't be too late. Mr. Thorne, I had teased, my heart swelling with the new weight of his last name. Your wife is waiting. The elevator pinged, opening onto the penthouse floor. The presidential suite was silent and cavernous, a sanctuary of velvet drapes and gold accents. I kicked off my heels the moment the door clicked shut behind me, letting out a long sigh of relief. The silence felt heavy after the roar of the reception, but it was a welcome peace. I wandered into the bedroom, the massive four-poster bed dominating the space, covered in rose petals shaped into a heart. It was cheesy. Yes, but it made me giggle. A sudden burst of childish energy overtook me. Maybe it was the adrenaline, or perhaps the champagne, but I didn't want to just sit there waiting like a statue. I wanted to surprise him. I wanted to see that boyish grin break across his face when he realized his dignified wife was still just a playful girl at heart. I scanned the room. The closet was too obvious. The bathroom was too cliché. My eyes landed on the bed. Perfect, I whispered to myself. I dropped to my knees, the layers of my $20,000 lace gown pooling around me like foam on the ocean. It was a struggle to maneuver the massive skirt, but I managed to shimmy underneath the heavy wooden frame. The space was tight and smelled of dust and carpet cleaner. It was darker than I expected, the only light filtering in from the gap between the duvet and the floor. I felt ridiculous, absolutely absurd, but a bubble of laughter threatened to escape my throat. I clamped a hand over my mouth, stifling it. I pulled my phone from the hidden pocket of my dress. I opened the camera app, flipped it to video mode, and propped it against a stray slipper I had kicked under there earlier. I wanted to capture the moment he walked in, confused, calling my name, only for me to pop out and tackle him. "Okay, Julian," I murmured, hitting the record button. "Come find me." 5 minutes passed, then 10. My elbows began to ache against the hard floor. The novelty of the prank was wearing off, replaced by a creeping fatigue. 20 minutes in, my legs were cramping, and the dust was making my nose itch. I reached out to grab my phone, ready to abandon the mission and just order room service, when I heard the electronic beep of the door lock. I froze. A smile tugged at my lips again. Finally, the heavy oak door swung open. I held my breath, watching the screen of my phone, which displayed a low-angle view of the room. I expected Julian's confident stride, perhaps a call of my name. Instead, I heard laughter. It wasn't just Julian's deep chuckle. It was accompanied by a high, sharp giggle that sent a strange shiver down my spine. Heavy footsteps crossed the threshold, vibrating through the floorboards against my chest. 2 pairs of shoes walked into the frame. I recognized the first pair immediately. They were Julian's black Italian leather Oxfords, the ones I had gifted him for our engagement. But right next to them, stepping in perfect rhythm, was a pair of towering blood-red stilettos. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. I stared at the screen, my mind racing to make sense of the image. Maybe it was a staff member, a relative helping him with gifts. But the red shoes didn't move away. They stopped right at the foot of the bed, inches from my face, blocked only by the hanging duvet. God, I thought we'd never get out of there. A woman's voice said. I knew that voice. The realization hit me hard, stealing the air from my lungs. Relax, Julian's voice replied, devoid of the warmth he had shown me all day. The hard part is over. Now comes the fun part. I lay paralyzed in the dark, the phone recording silently, capturing the stillness of the shoes and the terrifying shift in the atmosphere. The playful prank had just turned into a trap, and I was the one caught inside. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow, stripping the air from my lungs. Those were not just any red heels. They were Christian Louboutins, custom-dyed a specific shade of scarlet that matched the branding of the Sterling Corporation. They belonged to Monica, my husband's executive assistant, the woman who had held my hand when I was nervous about the seating charts, the woman I considered a sister. I waited for Julian to explain, to tell her to leave, to demand privacy for his new bride. But the man who spoke next was not the charming, poetic soul I had married hours ago. God! Finally! Julian groaned, the sound vibrating through the floorboards. It was a sound of relief, but it was cold, devoid of the warmth he reserved for me in public. Get over here! Wait! Monica's voice was sharp, cutting through the silence. A heavy object slammed onto the mattress directly above my head, making the springs squeak. It must have been her handbag. Is the idiot asleep yet? My heart stopped. I pressed my hand over my mouth, my fingers trembling so violently I could barely keep a seal on my lips. She is probably soaking in the bubble bath I ordered, Julian replied, his voice dripping with a sneering condescension that made my stomach turn. Or she is sitting by the window, staring at the moon and waiting for me like a loyal puppy. You know how she is. Pathetic. I cannot believe I had to watch you kiss her. Monica spat out. There was the sound of rustling fabric, followed by the clinking of glasses. Do you have any idea how exhausting it is to play the devoted assistant? I nearly gagged when she hugged me at the altar and thanked me for being her rock. It is almost over. Baby, Julian soothed her. Think of the prize. We are talking about control of the Sterling Trust. That is $500 million. For that kind of money, I would have married a gargoyle. Tears welled up in my eyes, hot and stinging, blurring the view of the shoes on my phone screen. I bit down on my lower lip, sinking my teeth into the soft flesh until I tasted the copper tang of blood. I needed the physical pain to ground me, to keep me from screaming and crawling out from under the bed to claw their eyes out. But when Monica whined, I am tired of waiting in the shadows. Julian, when are you going to get rid of her? You promised me a timeline. 2 years, Julian stated matter-of-factly, as if he were discussing a quarterly earnings report rather than his wife's life. I need 2 years to solidify my position on the board and replace the old guard with my own people. If I move too fast, her father will get suspicious. 2 years is too long, Monica muttered. It will go by fast. Julian interrupted, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. We will start gaslighting her next month. Small things at first, misplaced items, forgotten conversations. By the time I commit her to the asylum, everyone in New York will think it is a mercy. They will say poor Julian tried so hard to save his crazy wife. I squeezed my eyes shut. My tears dripped off my cheeks and soaked into the dusty hotel carpet. This was not a sudden affair. This was a calculated execution of my life. Are you sure the money is safe? Monica asked, her tone greedy. Positive. Julian laughed, a dark, ugly sound. She never reads the fine print. She trusts me implicitly. I changed Clause 14 of the prenup 3 days ago. If she is declared mentally incompetent, power of attorney goes to the spouse. That is me. I own her. Monica. I own Sterling Tech. The bed springs groaned loudly as two bodies collapsed onto the mattress above me. I was trapped in a coffin of my own making, lying directly beneath the two people plotting my destruction. You are a genius, Monica purred. I know, Julian replied. Then came the sounds of kissing, wet and sloppy, followed by cruel, mocking laughter. Each giggle, each moan was a knife twisting in my chest. I lay there in the dust, the taste of my own blood in my mouth, listening to the soundtrack of my life falling apart. The Scarlet who crawled under this bed was dead, and the woman lying in the dark was learning how to hate. My fingers clawed into the thick pile of the carpet until I felt a nail snap, the sharp pain grounding me in reality. Every fiber of my being screamed to roll out from under that bed and unleash a primal scream that would shatter the windows of the presidential suite. I wanted to smash the champagne bottle over Julian's head. I wanted to tear that designer dress off Monica's back and drag her out of the room by her hair. Rage, hot and blinding, flooded my veins, threatening to consume me entirely. But then a cold wave of clarity washed over me. It was the Sterling bloodline waking up, the legacy of 3 generations of ruthless business tycoons. My father's voice echoed in my mind, a mantra he had repeated since I was a child, sitting in boardrooms I was too young to understand. Emotion is a liability. Scarlet. Strategy is the only currency that matters. If I crawled out now, screaming and crying, what would happen? I had a video of shoes and voices. In a court of law, Julian's army of lawyers would tear it apart. They would claim it was edited, or worse. They would use my hysteria as the first piece of evidence for my insanity plea. I would be playing exactly into the narrative they had already written for me. I would lose the company. I would lose my freedom. Let us go downstairs, Julian said, his voice moving towards the door. One drink at the bar, to celebrate the beginning of the end. To the idiot, Monica giggled. The door clicked shut, and the silence that followed was deafening. I waited 60 seconds, counting each beat of my heart, before I scrambled out from the darkness. My knees were bruised, and my $20,000 Vera Wang gown was gray with dust and lint. I stumbled toward the full-length mirror and stared at the stranger looking back at me. The blushing bride was gone. Her eyes, once bright with hope, were now dark, hollow tunnels. I looked like a ghost, but as I stared, something hardened in my expression. The tears stopped. The trembling in my hands ceased. The girl who believed in love had died under that bed, and a woman with a heart of ice had been born in her place. I grabbed my phone. My hands moved with surgical precision as I uploaded the video to my encrypted cloud server, a private vault that Julian did not know existed. Then, I forwarded a copy to Arthur, my family's personal attorney and the one man my father trusted implicitly. I added a text message, "Do not open yet. Just keep it safe. War is coming." I stripped off the ruined wedding dress and kicked it into the back of the closet. I marched into the bathroom and scrubbed my skin under scalding hot water, trying to wash away the feeling of being near them. I scrubbed until my skin was raw and pink, but I knew the stain of their betrayal went deeper than my pores. 15 minutes later, I was the picture of marital perfection. I wore a slip of white silk that clung to my curves, my hair brushed into soft waves, my face fresh and dewy. I sat on the edge of the bed, a book open on my lap, my breathing steady and shallow. When the key card beeped and the door opened, I did not flinch. "Scarlet, darling," Julian's voice called out, smooth as velvet. I looked up, blinking slowly as if waking from a dream. "Oh, Julian," I said, my voice soft and sleepy. I must have drifted off. The bath was so warm, and I was so tired from the reception. Julian walked into the light, loosening his tie. He looked relieved. He walked over to the bed and sat down next to me, reaching out to stroke my cheek. His hand felt like a branding iron, but I leaned into his touch, forcing a smile. "I am so sorry I took so long." He lied, his eyes full of fake concern. "The manager was being difficult about the floral charges. I did not want to bother you with it." "You are so good to me," I whispered, as he leaned in to kiss my forehead. I saw it, faint, but undeniable, a smudge of crimson lipstick on the crisp white collar of his shirt. It was barely there, a ghost of a kiss. But to me, it was a declaration of war. "I love you, Mrs. Thorne," he said. "I love you too." I lied, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. The night that followed was a blur of nausea and acting. Every touch, every whisper of endearment from him made my skin crawl. I wanted to vomit. I wanted to run. But I stayed. I let him hold me. I played the role of the happy, oblivious wife because I knew that to catch a monster, you have to lead him into the cage yourself. Tonight, I was the bait. Tomorrow, I would become the hunter. 3 months had passed since the wedding. The honeymoon was over, and the hunt had begun. Julian sat across from me at the mahogany breakfast table, pushing a stack of documents toward my coffee cup. "It is just standard authorization forms, babe," he said, not looking up from his tablet. "Since I am handling the day-to-day operations of the new tech wing, I need signature authority to speed things up. You do not want to be bothered with boring supply chain invoices, do you?" I took a sip of my latte, hiding my smirk behind the rim. "Oh, Julian, you know how numbers make my eyes glaze over. Just show me where to sign." I pulled a pen from my purse. But these were not the documents he had printed out. During a spill I had orchestrated with a well-placed elbow 5 minutes prior. I had swapped his folder with an identical one prepared by my legal team. The font was the same, the headers were the same, but the fine print rendered my signature invalid without a countersignature from the chairman of the board, my father. I signed my name with a flourish, effectively giving him permission to do absolutely nothing. "You are the best," he said, snatching the papers away with a greed he could barely conceal. He thought he had the keys to the kingdom, but he did not know I had already changed the locks. While he played CEO, I had hired a team of forensic accountants and private investigators. The dossier they handed me 2 days later was thick and damning. "He is in deep, Mrs. Thorne," the lead investigator had told me, "gambling. High-stakes poker and underground clubs and some very foolish investments in cryptocurrency. He owes $5 million to a loan shark syndicate in New Jersey. $5 million. My husband was not just a cheater. He was a desperate man. The report detailed how he was leveraging his title as Mr. Scarlet Hayes to buy time, promising these criminals a massive payout once he secured control of my trust fund. Then there was Monica. My forensic team found that she was siphoning money from the subsidiary accounts. It was small amounts at first, $5,000 here, $10,000 there, disguised as consulting fees. She was using my company's money to buy the very designer clothes she wore to my house. I decided to pull the rug out, inch by inch. I utilized my executive override to quietly freeze capital flow to the projects Julian was leading. I created bureaucratic black holes, causing his vendors to demand payment he did not have. I wanted to see him sweat, to turn the screws tighter. I began hosting intimate dinner parties. I invited Monica. Of course. Oh, Monica. I almost forgot. I said one evening, loud enough for the entire table to hear. I reached under my chair and pulled out a vintage Chanel bag. It was authentic, but I had deliberately scuffed the bottom. I was cleaning out my closet and found this old thing. I was going to donate it to charity. But I thought, well, it might suit your style better. You know, since you are still building your collection. Monica's face went stiff, her cheeks flushing a deep, humiliated red. She had to accept it. She had to smile. "Thank you, Scarlett," she forced out, her voice tight. "That is generous." "Do not mention it," I chirped. "I hate seeing things go to waste." Julian glared at me, his jaw clenching. As the pressure on his finances mounted, his mask began to slip. Later that night, when he could not find his cufflinks which I had hidden in the freezer, he exploded. "You are so useless." Sometimes he shouted, slamming the drawer shut, "always losing things. You are becoming forgetful. Scarlett, it is concerning. Maybe you need to see a doctor." I looked at him, wide-eyed and trembling, feigning fear. I am sorry, Julian. I do not know what is happening to me. Get it together," he hissed, storming out. I waited until the door slammed before I let the terrified expression drop. I walked to the freezer, retrieved his ice-cold cufflinks, and smiled. He thought he was driving me crazy, but I was the one steering the car, and we were heading straight for a cliff. The air in our penthouse was thick with Julian's nervous energy. He paced back and forth across the Persian rug, a glass of scotch in his hand, while I sat on the sofa, feigning attention to a magazine. "It is time. Scarlett," Julian declared, stopping to look at me with feverish intensity. "Your father has officially announced his retirement. The board is waiting for a direction. We need to show strength. I want to organize a gala. A massive charity event where we announce my appointment as the new CEO of Sterling Tech." I lowered the magazine, widening my eyes in mock admiration. I knew exactly why he was desperate. The loan sharks were circling, and he needed full access to the company treasury to pay off his $5 million debt. "Oh, Julian, that is brilliant," I exclaimed, clasping my hands together. "You deserve this. In fact, I want to make this night special. I want to organize the creative side. But you should handle the finances. Show them you can spend big to make big." I reached into my purse and pulled out a sleek, black titanium credit card. It was a supplementary card linked to my personal account. But what Julian did not know was that I had set a strict hidden spending limit on the back end just this morning. "Use this," I said, pressing it into his hand. "Spare no expense. I want to give you the surprise of your life that night." "You are amazing, babe," he said, kissing me quickly before retreating to his study to call Monica. I knew exactly what he was telling her. My listening devices picked up every word. He promised her she would be announced as the new vice president standing right beside him. They were already celebrating their victory, drunk on power they did not possess. To accelerate their downfall, I decided to plant a seed of pure temptation. The next morning, I left a leather folder conspicuously open on my mahogany desk in the library. Inside was a drafted legal document titled Last Will and Testament, Amendment. The text, which I had forged, stated that due to my declining mental health, I intended to transfer full power of attorney and all assets to my husband, Julian Thorne, immediately upon my incapacitation or death. The bait was taken within the hour. From the hidden camera feed, I watched Monica sneak into the library while I was out. She read the document, her eyes widening with greed. She took a photo of it and sent it to Julian. Their reaction was instantaneous. Thinking they had won, they got sloppy. They stopped routing their embezzled funds through complex shell companies and started transferring money directly to offshore accounts, rushing to secure their nest egg before my unfortunate accident or institutionalization. They left digital fingerprints everywhere, while they were busy counting chickens that would never hatch. I was in a soundproof conference room at the Sterling headquarters. Seated around the long glass table were the 6 most powerful members of the board of directors, men and women who had built this company with my father. He is young, Scarlett, Mr. Henderson, the oldest board member, said dismissively, "Ambition is not a crime." "Ambition is not," I replied, my voice steel, "but theft is." I slid a thick binder across the table. It did not contain the video of the affair that was personal. This was professional. It contained bank statements, IP logs, and proof of the $12 million Julian had siphoned out, along with the fake invoices Monica had generated. He is using the company as his personal piggy bank to pay off gambling debts, I explained, watching their faces turn from skepticism to fury. And he plans to gut the pension fund next. We will call the police immediately. Mrs. Gable stated, reaching for her phone. No, I said sharply, stopping her. Not yet. If we arrest him now, the stock plunges on the scandal. We need to do this publicly. We need to show the world that Sterling Tech purges its own corruption. I leaned forward, looking each of them in the eye. Let him have his gala. Let him walk on that stage thinking he is the king of the world. And when he reaches for the crown, I want you all to be there to watch me take his head. Mr. Henderson looked at the documents, then at me. A slow, grim smile spread across his face. Very well, Mrs. Thorne, he said. We will play your game. The trap was set. Julian and Monica were running towards the cliff edge at full speed, and I was the one holding the map. The sea breeze off the Atlantic whipped through the manicured gardens of the Vanderbilt estate in the Hamptons. It was the perfect stage for a coronation or an execution, depending on who you asked. The lawn was crowded with 500 of the most influential people in New York, a sea of black ties and designer gowns. Reporters from the Wall Street Journal and cameras from major networks lined the perimeter, hungry for the announcement of the new king of Sterling Tech. Julian moved through the crowd like he owned the very air they breathed. In his bespoke tuxedo, he looked every inch the corporate monarch. He shook hands, slapped backs, and flashed that winning smile that had fooled me for so long. He believed the world was at his feet. He believed that in less than an hour, he would sign the papers that handed him my family's legacy on a silver platter. Then I saw Monica. She was drifting through the crowd, trying too hard to look like she belonged. She wore a plunging neckline that left little to the imagination. But the centerpiece of her outfit was the diamond necklace resting against her throat. She touched it constantly, preening. Julian had bought it for her yesterday as a pre-victory gift. What neither of them knew was that I had intercepted the delivery. The stones around her neck were high-grade cubic zirconia, worth less than $200. The real diamonds were currently sitting in my safe deposit box. I stepped out onto the terrace. A hush fell over the immediate area. For years, I had worn pastels, soft pinks and baby blues, the colors of a compliant wife. Tonight, I wore red, a deep, blood-red silk gown that fit like a second skin, with a slit that ran up to my thigh and a neckline that demanded attention. I had traded my soft waves for a sleek, sharp bob, and my lips were painted the same shade as my dress. I was not the prey anymore. I was the predator. Julian saw me, and his smile faltered for a fraction of a second before he recovered. He rushed over, gripping my elbow with a force that would leave a bruise. "You are late!" he hissed into my ear, his voice low enough that the cameras could not pick it up. "And what is this dress? You look like a—" "Never mind. Just remember the plan. You go up there, you cry a little about being overwhelmed, and you hand the microphone to me. Do not mess this up, Scarlett, or I swear to God." I turned to him, my expression serene. I reached up and straightened his bow tie, my fingers brushing against his pulse point. It was hammering. "Do not worry, darling," I said, my voice smooth and loud enough for the nearby senator to hear. "I know the script better than you do." Julian frowned, confused by my tone, but before he could respond, a man in a headset tapped him on the shoulder. It was the lead caterer. "Mr. Thorne, I am so sorry to interrupt," the man said, looking uncomfortable. "But there seems to be a problem with the payment for the vintage champagne. The card was declined." What Julian scoffed, laughing nervously. "That is impossible. It is a black card. Try it again." "We did, sir, 3 times. It says insufficient funds and fraud alert." Julian's face went pale. I will handle this. He turned to find Monica, waving frantically at her across the lawn. But Monica was busy. 2 large men in dark suits private security I had instructed personally were flanking her. She was trying to hand a waiter a credit card to pay for the floral arrangements that had just arrived. "I am sorry, Miss," one of the guards said loudly. "We have a report of a stolen credit card matching this number. We need you to come with us." "Stolen," Monica shrieked, her voice shrill and panicked. "This is my card." "Well, it is." "I have permission." Julian looked from the caterer to Monica, sweat beginning to bead on his forehead. The cracks were starting to show. The ground beneath his feet was shifting, and he did not even know the earthquake was just beginning. The orchestra began to play a swelling fanfare, the cue for Julian to take the stage. He adjusted his tuxedo jacket, shot a glare at the confused caterers, and marched toward the podium like a man heading to his coronation. He stepped up to the crystal lectern, raised his chin, and tapped the microphone. Silence. He tapped it again, harder this time. A deafening, high-pitched screech of audio feedback tore through the air, causing the front row of distinguished investors to wince and cover their ears. Julian recoiled, his composure cracking. He looked frantically toward the sound booth, where my hired technician gave a helpless, exaggerated shrug and held up a mess of disconnected cables. "Ladies and gentlemen," Julian shouted, his voice thin and straining without amplification, barely reaching the first row of tables. "If I could just have your—" The microphone cut out completely. He looked small, impotent, and foolish standing there in the silence. But the silence did not last long. A sudden roar erupted from the main iron gates of the estate. Flashbulbs from the paparazzi popped like a lightning storm, illuminating a chaotic scene. A group of 4 burly men in leather jackets method actors I had hired from a local theater troupe were shoving against the security perimeter, screaming at the top of their lungs. Thorne, one of them, bellowed, his voice projecting clearly over the lawn. "Where is our money? You owe the boss $5 million. Thorne, you cannot hide in there." The press went wild, microphones thrusting forward to catch every word. Julian's face drained of all color, turning a sickly shade of gray. He did not know they were actors. He thought the New Jersey loan sharks had finally come to collect on his gambling debts, and they had done it on national television. Panic, raw and primal, seized him. He scrambled off the stage, abandoning his speech. He grabbed my wrist, his fingers digging into my skin with bruising force, and dragged me away from the terrace toward the private VIP holding room. "Smile," he hissed through gritted teeth as we passed a confused senator. "Keep walking!" He threw me into the room and kicked the door shut, locking it. The sound of the party was muffled, replaced by his ragged, terrified breathing. He spun on me, his eyes wild and bloodshot. The charming husband was gone. Only the cornered rat remained. "What is going on out there?" he screamed, spit flying from his lips. "Did you do this? Is this some kind of sick joke?" He did not wait for an answer. He slammed a crumpled document against the wall, the power of attorney transfer. "Sign it," he roared. "Sign the papers right now. I need access to the accounts tonight." "Julian, you are hurting me," I said, looking at his hand crushing my wrist. "I do not care." He squeezed harder, twisting my arm until a sharp pain shot up my shoulder. He leaned in, his face inches from mine, smelling of fear and scotch. "You sign this transfer immediately, or I swear to God, Scarlet, I will make you disappear. I will put you in a hole so deep no one will ever find you. Do you understand me? You are nothing without me." I looked into his eyes. I expected to feel fear. I expected to cower as the old Scarlet would have, but I felt nothing but a cold, burning contempt. The adrenaline that surged through me was not flight. It was fight. I stopped pulling away. I stood perfectly still, my gaze hardening into ice. "You are making a mistake," I said, my voice dropping an octave, devoid of the trembling weakness he was used to. The only mistake was marrying a useless. "Shut up," I commanded. The authority in my voice snapped his mouth shut. He blinked. Stunned, I wrenched my wrist from his grip with a violent jerk, stepping back and smoothing the silk of my red dress. I looked him up and down with a sneer of absolute disgust. "You think you are the hunter?" Julian, I asked, tilting my head. "You think you are the wolf who caught the naive sheep? You are pathetic." I took a step toward him, and for the first time in our marriage, he took a step back. "You are not the hunter." "Julian," I whispered, letting the words hang in the air like a blade. "You are just the prey." He stood frozen, his brain unable to process the shift. I turned my back on him, checked my reflection in the mirror to ensure my lipstick was perfect, and opened the door. "Now, if you will excuse me," I said over my shoulder, "I have a company to run." I walked out into the cool night air. The moment the crowd saw me, a hush fell, followed by a ripple of anticipation. I began to ascend the stairs to the stage, the spotlight swinging to find me. Scarlet Julian's scream tore from the room behind me. "Get back here!" He charged out of the holding room, his face twisted in rage, intending to drag me off the steps. He lunged, his hand reaching for my ankle, but he never made contact. Two of my personal bodyguards, men the size of linebackers, stepped out of the shadows and blocked his path like a concrete wall. "Get out of my way!" Julian shrieked, shoving against them uselessly. "Mr. Thorne, you need to step back," the head of security rumbled. Suddenly, a figure in a torn dress came running across the lawn. It was Monica. Her makeup was smeared down her cheeks in black streaks, and she was hyperventilating. "Julian," she wailed, rushing toward him. "They cut the card." "The police are here. They said it is fraud. You have to tell them. You have to help me." She grabbed his lapels, sobbing hysterically. Julian, blinded by his own panic and rage at being blocked from me, looked at her with pure hatred. "Get off me, you idiot!" he snarled. He shoved her with both hands, violently. Monica stumbled backward in her towering heels, her arms flailing, before she crashed hard onto the manicured grass. Julian did not even glance at her. He stood panting, blocked by my guards, forced to watch as I reached the microphone, the only person standing in the light. I stood alone at the center of the stage, the single beam of the spotlight burning against my skin. It felt like a cleansing fire. Below me, the crowd was a shifting sea of confusion, their murmurs rising like a tide. I gripped the sides of the crystal podium, feeling the cool, sharp edges against my palms. I looked down at Julian, who was still breathless and raging at the foot of the stairs, held back by my security team. I looked at Monica, who was trying to scrape the mud off her knees in the grass. I leaned into the microphone. It was not broken. It never had been. "Ladies and gentlemen," I began, my voice clear and amplified, booming across the estate and into the millions of homes streaming the event live. "Thank you for coming. Tonight was supposed to be a coronation. My husband, Julian, has been working toward this moment since the day we met. He told me he wanted a night that New York would never forget." I paused, letting the silence stretch until it was almost unbearable. I offered a small, terrifyingly sweet smile to the camera. "He asked for a surprise, and I am a wife who always pleases her husband." I reached into my pocket and pressed a small remote clicker. Behind me, the massive 60-foot LED screen that was meant to display Sterling Corporation's quarterly earnings flickered to life. But there were no bar graphs. There were no pie charts or projections of future growth. Instead, a grainy, low-light video filled the massive display. The angle was low, shooting out from under a bed frame, focused on a dusty carpet and the bottom of a duvet. The image was shaky, handheld, but the audio was crystal clear. It had been professionally remastered to ensure that every syllable was audible in surround sound. Is the idiot asleep yet? Monica's voice boomed through the high-fidelity speakers, shrill and mocking. A gasp rippled through the audience. I saw Mrs. Astor cover her mouth with a gloved hand. She is probably soaking in the bubble bath. Waiting for me like a loyal puppy, Julian's voice replied, distorted slightly by the echo of the hotel room, but undeniably his. She is pathetic. Julian froze. His face, which had been red with exertion, drained of color until he looked like a corpse. He stared up at the screen, his mouth opening and closing, soundless. The video continued. Merciless. I just need 2 years, the on-screen Julian boasted, his voice dripping with arrogance. We will start gaslighting her next month. By the time I commit her to the asylum, everyone in New York will think it is a mercy. The word asylum hung in the air, heavy and toxic. The crowd was paralyzed. 500 of the city's elite were silent, listening to the man they had just toasted casually plot the psychological destruction of his wife. Then came the sounds. The wet, grotesque sounds of kissing, the bed springs squeaking above the camera, the cruel laughter as they mocked my intelligence, my body, my love. I own her, Monica. I own Sterling Tech. The screen went black. For 3 seconds, there was absolute silence. Then, the sound of a champagne glass shattering on the terrace broke the spell. A low, horrified murmur erupted, turning into a roar of shock and disgust. The camera operators, realizing they were witnessing the scandal of the century, abandoned their wide shots. They zoomed in tight, projecting Julian's face onto the side monitors. He looked like a trapped animal. His eyes were darting frantically from the screen to the crowd, sweat pouring down his temples. Monica was sobbing on the ground, shielding her face from the blinding flashes of the paparazzi. No! Julian suddenly screamed, the sound tearing from his throat. He broke free from the shock, lunging toward the stairs again. Turn it off, turn it off. He scrambled up the steps, tripping over his own feet, his tuxedo disheveled, his eyes wild. He reached the center of the stage, not to attack me, but to grab the microphone, desperate to control the narrative. It is a lie, he shrieked, his voice cracking, booming over the speakers. He pointed a trembling finger at me. That is not real. It is deep fake. She made it with AI. She is crazy. I told you she was unstable. She is trying to frame me. I did not move. I did not flinch. I just stood there, calm and untouchable in my red dress, watching him unravel. The more he screamed, the more he looked exactly like the monster on the tape. Look at her, he yelled at the horrified audience, spit flying from his lips. She is sick. Why are you looking at me like that? It is fake. I love my wife. Do you? I asked, my voice calm, cutting through his hysteria without even needing the microphone. I pointed to the screen again. A new image appeared. It was not a video this time. It was a bank transfer document, blown up to the size of a billboard. Is the $12 million you stole from the company fake too? Julian, I asked. The crowd gasped again. Julian turned around slowly to look at the screen, and I watched the last of his hope die. With a calm flick of my wrist, I pressed the button on the remote again. The image of my husband's infidelity vanished, replaced instantly by something far more damning in the eyes of the law. The massive screen filled with rows and columns of complex data. To the untrained eye, it was just numbers. To the federal agents I had stationed in the catering van outside, it was a confession signed in blood. What you are seeing now, I narrated, my voice echoing through the silent garden, is the paper trail of $12 million, money that was systematically siphoned from the Sterling Corporation's Research and Development Fund over the last 90 days. I pointed to a highlighted column. And here is where it went. Not to crypto investments, as Julian told his creditors, but to a series of shell companies registered in the Cayman Islands under the name Red Stiletto Holdings, a rather unimaginative alias. Wouldn't you agree? Monica, the crowd turned as one to look at the woman cowering on the grass. She looked like a trapped animal, mud staining her legs, the fake diamonds glittering mockingly around her neck. At that exact moment, the main doors of the estate swung open with a heavy thud. A dozen men and women in windbreakers emblazoned with FBI and NYPD Economic Crimes Unit marched onto the lawn. They moved with the swift, practiced efficiency of a reaper coming to collect a soul. I brought the microphone back to my lips. I did not yell. I did not cry. I spoke with the icy precision of a judge passing a death sentence. "Julian Thorne," I announced, looking down at him as he stood trembling on the stage. "You are hereby terminated from your position at Sterling Corporation for cause. Furthermore, my lawyers filed for an annulment this morning on the grounds of fraud. You are not the CEO. You are not my husband. You are trespassing." The spell broke. Panic, sheer and absolute, seized the garden. Monica scrambled to her feet, kicking off her heels to run. She tried to blend into a group of junior executives near the buffet, pulling a waiter's jacket over her head to hide her face. "She is right there." A woman's voice rang out. It was Sarah, the head of HR, pointing an accusing finger at Monica. "That is her. That is the woman who authorized the transfers." Monica screamed as two officers grabbed her by the arms. She thrashed and kicked, her mascara running down her face in black tears. But the handcuffs clicked shut with a sound of finality that reached even the stage. Julian saw Monica go down and made his move. He didn't look at me. He didn't look at the screen. He jumped off the side of the stage, scrambling through the flower beds, heading for the service exit near the kitchen tent. He thought he could outrun the police. He thought he could slip away into the night. He was wrong. Just as he reached the perimeter, 3 men stepped out from the shadows of the hedges. They were not wearing police uniforms. They were wearing cheap leather jackets and expensive watches. I recognized them from the surveillance photos my private investigator had shown me. They were the loan sharks, the real ones, who had been watching the live stream and realized their $5 million was about to disappear into federal custody. Julian skidded to a halt, his eyes bulging. "Please," he wheezed, backing away from the menacing figures. "I have the money. I just need time." The lead shark stepped forward and shoved Julian hard in the chest, sending him sprawling into the dirt right at the feet of the approaching FBI agents. It was a poetic collision of his 2 greatest fears. As the agents hauled Julian up and slammed him against a catering table to cuff him, he finally looked at me. His face was a mask of snot and tears, his dignity stripped away entirely. "Scarlett," he screamed, thrashing against the agents. "Scarlett, tell them I love you. I did it for us. Please, baby, do not let them take me. I love you." I walked to the edge of the stage and looked down at him. I felt absolutely nothing. No anger, no sadness. It was like looking at a cockroach that had been crushed under a boot. "You do not love me, Julian," I said, my voice amplified so the whole world could hear his humiliation. "You loved my money, and now you have neither." I turned back to the stunned press corps, composing myself instantly. "I want to make one thing clear," I stated, addressing the cameras. "Sterling Corporation will fully cooperate with the investigation. And as for the stolen $12 million, it will be recovered in full by liquidating the personal assets of Mr. Thorne and his accomplice. Every car, every watch, and every pair of red shoes will be sold until my company is made whole." The flashing blue and red lights of the police cruisers painted the garden in a chaotic strobe, washing over the shocked faces of the Manhattan elite. I watched from the high ground of the stage as the life Julian had built on lies crumbled into dust. He was no longer the dashing CEO. He was a weeping mess in a torn tuxedo, shoved roughly toward the back of a squad car, his wrists bound in steel. Monica fared no better. An officer was currently cataloging her evidence on the hood of a patrol car. He reached for her neck and unclasped the necklace she had paraded around all night. "Hey!" Monica shrieked, trying to lunge at him. "Be careful with that. That is a diamond necklace. It is worth $500,000. The officer held it up to the light, squinting at the clasp. "This is plastic, ma'am. I have seen better jewelry in a gumball machine. Bag it!" Monica's jaw dropped, her humiliation complete. She looked up at me, but I did not look back. I turned to the microphone one last time. The crowd was still buzzing, but they fell silent as I spoke. Tonight was about exposing the rot in my company, I said, my voice steady and strong. But tomorrow is about healing. I am officially announcing the launch of the Phoenix Foundation. I am endowing it with $50 million of my own money to provide legal aid and financial support to women who have been victims of financial abuse and marital fraud. No woman should ever have to hide under a bed to find out the truth. Applause broke out, tentative at first, then thundering. It was the sound of respect. I had not just survived, I had conquered, but I had one final knife to twist. As the officers prepared to shove Julian into the back of the cruiser, Arthur, my family's elderly lawyer, stepped out of the shadows. He moved slowly, holding a single sheet of paper. He tapped on the window of the police car. The officer rolled it down. "Mr. Thorne," Arthur said, his voice dry as parchment. "A parting gift from your wife. She thought you should have your medical records." Julian, confused and tearful, took the paper with his cuffed hands. Monica, who was shoved into the seat next to him, leaned over to read it. "What is this?" Julian stammered. "I do not." "It is a fertility test from your checkup last year," Arthur explained, loud enough for Monica to hear. "The one you hid. It confirms you have been sterile since birth. There was never going to be an heir. Mr. Thorne, you were lying to everyone." The silence inside the police car was heavy. Julian froze. He had promised Monica a child to secure the sterling fortune, a baby that would displace me. It was the linchpin of their entire plan. Monica slowly turned her head to look at him. Her eyes were wide, manic, and terrifying. "You," she whispered, her voice trembling with rage. "You told me we would have a family. You told me we would take it all. You are sterile, Monica. Listen to me," Julian pleaded, shrinking back against the door. "I was going to figure it out." "You liar," Monica screamed. She lunged at him, her fingernails raking across his face. The car rocked violently as she attacked him, screaming obscenities, while Julian howled in pain. The officers had to scramble to pull them apart, but the damage was done. They would spend the next 20 years in prison hating each other more than they hated me. I turned away from the chaos and walked into the quiet sanctuary of the mansion. I climbed the marble stairs to the master balcony, where a fresh bottle of vintage champagne was waiting in an ice bucket. I poured a glass and walked to the railing. The cool ocean wind hit my face, carrying the scent of salt and freedom. I looked down at the driveway, watching the police cars drive away, their sirens fading into the distance. The nightmare was over. I took a sip of the golden liquid. It tasted sweet. The girl who had hidden under the bed, trembling and crying, was gone. She had died in the dust of that hotel room. In her place stood Scarlet Hayes, the queen of the Sterling Empire. My heart was a little colder. Yes, but it was also unbreakable. I turned my back on the empty garden. Inside, the boardroom was waiting. My father's chair sat at the head of the table, empty for the first time in 40 years. I walked inside, the click of my heels echoing on the hardwood floor. I did not hesitate. I pulled out the chair, sat down, and placed my hands on the table. "Let us begin," I said to the empty room, ready to rule. "Thank you so much for listening to my story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from, so please comment your country or city below so we can share our thoughts together. If you enjoyed seeing justice served, please subscribe to the Lily Revenge Stories channel, like this video, and hit the hype button so this story can reach even more people.